Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to the Dawgland Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. Have Jackson McCurry alongside me. Today, we're going to dive into the NFL free agency period, or excuse me, legal tampering period that has started yesterday on Monday, March 9th. Browns have made a couple of moves, so we will dive into that as well as they made a couple of moves in this past week as well, including a trade that we will discuss here on today's episode. But Jack, how we doing, man, to get things started?
Oh, it's obviously an exciting time with the legal tampering period being underway, which means, always more room to talk about football. But life's good, man. How's things for you?
Things are pretty good. Things have been busy at work, worked some overtime last week. So I know we wanted to get in here and, talk about the trade that happened. But, unfortunately, it was just a very busy week for me. But we're here now. We got a lot to discuss. So let's dive into this NFL legal tampering period. The Browns made a move signing former first round pick and former LA Charger Zion Johnson to a 3-year deal worth $49.5 million. The offensive line is something that, we know they have to improve this offseason. This is the second step towards that. There's a trade that happened first, but this is the second step in terms of, putting probably a whole new starting five out there, it seems like. So what are your thoughts on the Browns acquisition of Zion Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, we knew they were going to address offensive line, and Andrew Berry has done so far. And obviously, I think Todd Monken and offensive line coach George Warhop have a hand in that as well. But obviously, the big fish was Tyler Linderbaum. And when he went to the Raiders, I think the Browns probably did pivot, but I'm sure they had several irons in the fire. This was a name that, you've seen on the boards, but like it didn't dive into him too much. But reading up on Zion Johnson, like there's a lot to like there. Like the tools are there for him to be a good lineman. Obviously, he hasn't shown that completely in Los Angeles the first couple years, but he shows you that he's durable. He's only missed 2 games during his first 4 seasons. Good athlete, doesn't give up a lot of sacks, which I think is pretty promising. And for the rate the Browns got him, because you really didn't have to break the bank for him. I think he's like in the 10 to 15 range in terms of guards APY money. So it's a good signing. I'm not going to call it a great signing, but we knew the Browns were going to be aggressive in upgrading the offensive line, and they didn't waste any time in doing so here in the first few days of the legal tampering period.
Yeah, I know a lot of it was they were probably going some big game hunting with Tyler Lindenbaum, probably Rasheed Walker, but ultimately they were able to get one of the guard spots taken care of, and another guard spot that they probably have taken care of is they re-signed guard Teven Jenkins, who was with the Browns this past year. He was only on about a $3 million last season. We're not sure. Details as of us recording haven't been released yet of his new deal with the Browns, but it does appear that, going into, the draft period here, that we do have our 2 starting guards, albeit we don't know what Joel Bitonio is going to do at this moment.
Yeah, we're still waiting on it, but today, which we're recording on Tuesday, March 10th, today's the day Bitonio's contract gets voided. And unless we hear something tonight that he's agreed to a minimum extension to help smooth over some of the dead cap that he's going to leave behind, Joel Bitonio is an unrestricted free agent. We don't know the way he's leaning, if he's leaning retirement, if he's leaning coming back, but the Browns didn't want to obviously leave themselves empty handed, and bringing back Teven Jenkins, who played well at the end of the season last year, sports publication you read, because like we were discussing before we recorded, Anthony, one site has him graded this way, another site has him graded another way, but Jenkins is a former top 40 pick. Didn't work out with the Bears. Obviously, there was injury issues, but the last few games down the stretch when the Browns benched Wyatt Teller for him, he showed he can he can do some things on that offensive line, and you're going to pencil him in as the right guard right now, and Zion Johnson as the left guard. We'll see if they bring anybody else in, whether it's another free agent to potentially compete. But, having Zion Johnson, having Teven Jenkins, both great athletes in terms of offensive line, both have been starters in the league. It just shows that Barry and company were aggressive in trying to fix this offensive line. Obviously, it's not a finished product yet. Still need a left tackle, still need a center, depending on how people feel about Luke Whippler, but there definitely needs to be some competition added there, to say the least. So we knew the Browns were going to be aggressive in fixing the offensive line. They've done so early on here during the offseason. There's still work to be done. Obviously, depth is also a concern, but you got to like the aggressiveness that they have taken so far in the offseason to try to fix the offensive line, because we knew how bad it was last year. Everybody's gone, at least right now, except Teven Jenkins. He's back. But obviously the 2026 line is going to look a lot different than the 2025 line.
And to round out that aggressiveness, the Browns made a trade last week, sending a fifth-round pick to the Houston Texans for offensive tackle Titus Howard, to which they ended up giving him a 3-year, $63 million extension. You're not going to do that kind of extension without him playing, one of your tackle spots and being the starter. So the Browns do have 3 of the 5 starting spots right now locked up. What are your thoughts about them picking up Titus Howard and adding him to the tackle mix currently?
I thought it was a good move for what the Browns had to give up. We had 3 fifth-round picks at the time of that trade. And I think it was the pick that we got from Vegas pick it. So that's a whole trade in of itself. The way that 5th-round pick's been moved around, and how it's been moved from, I think it was the Darius Smith to Kenny Pickett to Titus Howard. But when you look at the player, obviously he's been banged up at times in his career, but he's a versatile lineman who's had success in the league, good pass blocker, not so much in the run game. But you got to wonder, is coaching play a factor in that? If he comes in and works with George Warhop, can he make strides or improvements as a run blocker? But it's a guy that's very versatile. If something happens on the interior, he's got experience there at the guard positions. But the Browns obviously thought highly of him because they gave him 2-year extension. So, like I said, the aggressiveness has been there. We'll see if these guys pan out. But I love the aggressive nature. They're definitely following the Bears' blueprint from a year ago, where they were aggressive in upgrading that offensive line for Caleb Williams. Now, the Browns obviously still have quarterback questions, but there's no doubt Andrew Berry has followed what the Bears did, or is attempting to follow what the Bears did, and trying to upgrade the offensive line.
So you look at these couple of offensive linemen that we have signed, and I'm sure you guys can notice I spilled water on myself a little bit in the middle of take that last segment there of you talking. I'm like, goodness gracious, of all things. They're still in their late 20s, and we've talked about before how it seems to take offensive linemen maybe a little bit longer with how college football is nowadays to develop into what they're going to be at the professional level. So Zion Johnson coming right off his rookie deal, he's 26 years old. Titus Howard and Teven Jenkins, both 29 years old. What are your thoughts about, that direction of this with where they are, in their NFL careers?
I mean, they're all in their prime or getting ready to enter their prime. I agree with you. It does take some offensive lineman time to develop. Obviously, there's been guys that have come in and made an instant impact right out of the gate as rookies. But sometimes it takes guys to develop. And I think that happens in a lot of positions. Obviously, you look at some of the quarterbacks and even Malik Willis, he had to get humbled a little bit after a couple rocky first years in Tennessee. He goes to Green Bay, able to sit behind Jordan Love, and then he signs a massive deal with Miami yesterday. So, yeah, I like the approach. Obviously, you're getting guys in their late 20s because we weren't drafting 5 rookies to replace 5 veterans on the offensive line. That was never going to actually happen in reality. So I do like that they've addressed it with 3 veterans. Now, are they going to add 2 rookies to the offensive line at left tackle and center? That's to be determined. I mean, you got Luke Whippler, obviously, who's entering, I think, season 3, and he's obviously dealt with injuries, whether it's at Ohio State or with the Browns, and he's coming off an injury. So wouldn't be shocked if they add another veteran to the mix, whether it's at tackle or center, or maybe even both, because I did mention like depth obviously is a concern and was a concern last year with all the injuries we dealt with on the offensive line. But I like the approach, how they've handled it. They've, made moves in free agency and in a trade to fix the offensive line. And who knows, there could be another trade or another free agent signing down the line to continue to add depth to the line, because I feel like that's something Andrew Berry doesn't want to leave unattended, especially when it comes to the depth up there.
Yeah, and right now you still have, DeJuan Jones coming back from injury. We don't know how that's going to shake out. So there's some options currently in terms of depth with what they have, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's still, like you said, a couple more veterans. I would imagine, they're going to draft 2, 3 offensive linemen, not only as potential starters, but guys that they can develop, for down the road, because the length of, Johnson's and Howard's contract are both only 3 years. You probably want to have guys that you could project to replace them in that time frame as well. So there's definitely, I still think, a strong possibility that they could draft 2, 3, 4 offensive linemen this offseason. Maybe one of the unrestricted free agent guys is you're able to hit on as well. Find another veteran that gets cut late in training camp or right before that final cutdown day that you're able to bring in. We know that Andrew Berry likes offensive linemen, and they've been rolling with pretty much 10 on the active roster, 10 or 11 guys the last few years. So definitely going to be still some new names in this group, as we move forward. All right, let's switch over to defense here, because they did make one signing on the defensive side of things. I'll preface this by saying that we lost Devin Bush in free agency. He signed a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Chicago Bears. And in return, the Browns have brought in Quincy Williams, previously with the New York Jets, on a 2-year, $17 million deal. And it should be of note that
17. That's
up to $17 million deal. And it should be of note that he was with Mike Rutenberg, the Browns' new defensive coordinator, in 2 of his previous stops. So definitely some familiarity there, bringing in Quincy Williams for this defense.
Yeah, one of the group chats I'm in last night brought up a clip of Mike Rutenberg commenting on Quincy Williams during his introductory press conference. So hopefully the Browns don't get investigated for some kind of illegal tampering, because that would be something. But this is, to lose Devin Bush and to get Quincy Williams, I think is a solid free agent move by Andrew Berry, because you're getting someone who is just as talented as Devin Bush. Obviously, he's a little older. Quincy Williams is about going to be 30 by the time the regular season starts, but this is a guy who's a former All-Pro. Last year with the Jets, like, he just did not mesh well with the new coaching staff led by Aaron Glenn, according to some reports. But when he was with Mike Rutenberg and Robert Saleh with the Jets for all those years, like, the guy was one of the best linebackers in the league. The stat that I saw that was pretty significant was 50 tackles for a loss since 2023, and that leads all linebackers during that time frame. So yeah, if you're going to lose Devin Bush, like, this was the perfect replacement for him. To pair him up with Carson Schwarzenegger in that linebacker room, I think is perfect. Obviously, we don't know Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah's future. It's probably not looking good based on what Andrew Berry said at the scouting combine, but to get somebody like Quincy Williams, who you can plug in alongside Schwarzenegger, I thought that was a solid free agent signing.
Yeah, I agree with that too. It does seem when he is on and a part of things that he really has a high motor. Love to see that. Somebody that can fly around the defensive side of the football if they give him the opportunity to. And if he does have, this strong relationship with Rutenberg, hopefully they'll be able to keep him focus and be able just to play freely and, bring out the best parts of what we have seen him do, through some of the film that has been shared over on X and whatnot. So hopefully that is something that is on the positive side with him, and we'll be able to see. All right, couple more things of note here that I wanted to just bring up quickly, before we get on out of here. Speaking on the defensive side, Ronnie Hickman was given a second round tender, uh, which is $5.8 million. They did also restructure Deshaun Watson's contract, which will free up $35.7 million. As we head towards, actual real free agency and not the legal tampering period, um, is there anything else that you want to target in terms of free agency, and what additions you would like to see here?
I mean, obviously, wide receiver would have been one, but the way the market was just kind of completely out of hand. These last couple of days with Alec Pierce getting the deal that he got, with Romeo Dobbs getting the deal he got, I'm fine at wide receiver
Michael
now.
Pittman too, after the trade.
Yeah, like I know people were mad, and I'm low key was mad because he was going to Pittsburgh. But when I saw he was getting a 3-year extension, I was okay with that. And obviously, there's been the trade rumors going back to the combine for Marvin Harrison Jr., for Brian Thomas Jr. I think Chris Olave was floated out there as well. Like
There
those
was
deals don't.
The Garrett Wilson ones last year.
Yeah, I mean, would we all like to see the Browns upgrade the wide receiver position? Yes. You're probably guys just going to have to focus on the draft, because honestly, looking at what's left, I mean, a lot of guys like Jawan Jennings would be nice, but I don't know how realistic that is. The rest of the guys, Debo, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, those guys are all probably looking at contenders if they can even make it to a football field at this point. So that's not going to happen. In terms of free agency, like keep adding to the offensive line. The only tight end, unless an Njoku reunion is even remotely possible, is Chig Okonkwo from the Titans. Like that would be a nice tight end to pair up with Harold Fannin Jr. And then whatever nickel corner is available out there that the Browns should look at, because outside of Ward and Campbell, like there's not much left, or there's not much there in the cornerback room. So another tight end and a nickel corner at this point, like those are like the best things I would like to see the Browns go get. Maybe another running back to pair up with Jenkins and Sampson. But honestly, at that point, like if there's any more moves, I mean, there's going to be depth pieces, I think, at this point, and then all eyes are on the draft.
Do we think with Emerson that they could bring him back on a 1-year kind of a prove-it deal with him coming back from that injury that he suffered last year? Do you think that's what's in the cards here?
I would be all for it. Barry didn't seem to be all for it at the combine. I don't know if the negotiations just weren't going well, but I mean, that's interesting. Like I would love to see him come back on a prove it deal just to see how he is post Achilles injury. I'm not too optimistic about it, but yeah, I'm all for bringing Emerson back. But at this point, like he can't play nickel. I mean, yes, you can move Denzel or Campbell in, but those guys are highly paid to be outside corners. Like I know they love the versatility in Cleveland, but at this point, I'm looking for corner depth and a nickel to fill out that room. And I don't know what Emerson's going to be post Achilles.
Yeah, very, very curious to see. I mean, he did suffer it in training camp last year, so that the
Yeah.
timeline would make it more that he would certainly be ready for week 1. I would think if they were to bring him back, probably even be ready for training camp, because it seems like the recovery of those injuries have gotten quicker and quicker as the years have gone on for Achilles tears. So if they do bring him back, that'd be great. But yeah, like you said, after Denzel Ward, after Tyson Campbell, like there is really nobody. Which, I haven't really ruled out us taking one, in our first couple of rounds. If there's somebody that they really like, I could definitely see it, especially with Denzel Ward, being as old as he is getting up there in NFL years. You would probably want to find a replacement sooner rather than later, so you're not, in a really bad position because, this offseason is the consequence of the lack of addressing the offensive line over the last handful of seasons. You don't want to be in that same spot with corner, one of the more important positions in this league, especially with the receivers that you have in this division alone, let alone the rest of football. So, they need to, stay on top of having good corners. I think Campbell will be here for a while, but, you probably only have 2, 3. I think Denzel only has 2 years left on his deal. And after that, I would not be surprised if, he's not back or close to retirement, et cetera, with where he's at in his career. So, it's definitely a position I think that they could address here, in the draft, in those first few rounds for certain.
I would definitely agree because, like you mentioned with Denzel Ward, he's only got, I think, 2 years left on his deal. Tyson Campbell only has one more year of guarantee. So cornerback is definitely something that we should probably pay attention to, especially during the end of the draft. Like if the Browns drafted one in the top 100, I would not be stunned. Like I wasn't stunned when they drafted Martin Emerson in 2022, just because we needed depth behind Ward and Newsome at the time, and Emerson actually made sense and actually turned out to be a good pick. But yeah, Ward and Campbell's contracts are not long term. Miles Harden and Cam Mitchell did not pan out in terms of mid-round draft picks for the Browns. So the Browns need to find depth at the cornerback position. And we know Barry loves corner, so it would not be a stunner if they drafted one early in the draft. You mentioned Ronnie Hickman, right?
Yes, the tender that we gave him.
Yeah. Did it shock you that they put a second round tender on him?
No, because I feel like, he has definitely grown over his time here coming in as an undrafted free agent, and with where he's at currently, I don't think that that's another position that they want to lose this off season. So, getting the right to, match anything or get a second round pick for him, I think is a big deal here.
Yeah, I'm very curious on how this is going to go out because, like you said, he's making 5.8 million on the tender. I think it's been. I'm pretty sure it's been reported there's going to be the Browns are trying to extend him. So, and then you got to wonder about Grant Delpit because I think Delpit's contract's up. It's either after this coming season or the season after. So, safety is another position that could be. They could spend a high pick on, or maybe and not a high pick, but definitely a top 100 pick because safety depth is definitely in question too. So,
Yeah,
even though the defense is, oh, go ahead.
Delpit is entering the final year of his deal and has 4 void years after this season.
Oh, okay. So like he could get extended. Obviously, I think he's approaching 29 in age, so that's going to be an interesting one to watch. But as much as the defense is set, like there is questions of depth at certain positions, and the secondary is obviously one of those bigger position groups to watch.
Yeah, and it does happen that there is one of the best safeties to come out in a while with the 6th overall pick. That could certainly be a possibility. I don't think that they would take him, but you never know. And that's a thing for probably our next show is maybe talking about the draft a little bit more. But, I feel like if you could get a guy like a Myles Garrett in terms of you have to game plan for this guy every single game, that should be your focus at 6, whether that's a receiver, whether that's a safety, whether that's another defensive end. Like if there is a game changer at 6 that is available, I think that's where you have to go. But that's something more that, we can talk about later on.
I mean, obviously, this week's all about free agency. Then we can turn our attention to the draft and have those conversations of, well, if Caleb Downs is on the board, and then hypothetically we trade for a receiver, does Caleb is Caleb Downs at 6 in serious question? So we know Andrew Berry loves DBs. Caleb Downs is one of the 5 best players in this draft. Obviously, there's questions about his injury concerns. Obviously, that was a hot topic during the combine week. But yeah, that's a hot topic debate to have amongst Brown fans. As much as we need offense and we need offensive line, like, is Caleb Downs worth the gamble? Not that much of the gamble to pass on offense to take a blue chip player like him.
If I remember correctly, with Ohio State football, did he not play nickel a little bit as well in
I
terms of his
think, yeah,
versatility?
I'd have to go back and look, but I do think they like moved him all over because he's that
So
much of a dynamic player.
So if you still have Hickman and you still have Delpit, you could stick him at nickel, or you could move the other pieces around. Definitely a lot of versatility and interchangeable parts in that secondary. So, that's definitely a guy who can do just about everything in terms on defense. So, I would not be surprised, but certainly there's a time for that discussion, probably coming up here soon.
I went ahead and quickly looked it up. He played 601 snaps at Ohio State last year, 212 as a free safety, 185 in the box, and 122 at slot corner. So, yes,
Yeah.
he is a Swiss Army knife. I would say he's probably a free safety at the next level, which kind of puts into question: do you extend Hickman and then draft Downs, and maybe move Hickman over to the box safety and kind of just transition Delpit to Hickman? I don't know if that works football wise. I mean, I'm sure we'll get some comments on that, but I could see that being a scenario where you have an all Buckeye safety group with Downs and Hickman, and maybe even Delpit somehow too, and you have 3 safeties. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, especially if all those parts are interchangeable and you could do whatever you want on defense, just think of the disguising that you could do in terms of your coverages, with those 3 guys. And, maybe that's a route that they will go for, and still having, Denzel Ward and Tyson Campbell on the outside. So, look, certainly a lot of options for the Browns to go at 6, a whole lot more for them to think about with free agency here. We'll certainly stay on top of it, here on the Dawgland Podcast. Be sure to give Jack a follow over on X at Jack McCurry08. Be sure to give me a follow at Anthony Joki, Joki. The Dawgland is the handle, the Dawgland on X, Facebook, TikTok, etc. Be able to find us there. And remember, as always, go Browns.
Go Browns.